entitled parents' mom sabotaged every relationship, so I cut her off forever. The screenshot on Emma's phone felt like a knife twisting in my chest. There it was, plain as day, my mother's contact info at the top, followed by a wall of text that made my stomach drop. I'm so worried about Jake. He's been struggling with his mental health again, and I think he's having another episode. Last week I found him talking to himself in his apartment, and he's been forgetting to take his medication. I know you care about him, but I'm scared he might hurt you when he gets like this. Maybe it's better if you give him some space until he gets help. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Emma had screenshotted it 6 months ago, right before she'd suddenly become distant and broken up with me out of nowhere. The same Emma who told me she needed to focus on herself and that things were moving too fast. Jake. Emma's voice seemed to come from underwater. We were sitting in her car outside the coffee shop where we'd agreed to meet. I'd spent weeks convincing her to see me, telling her I just needed closure. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I couldn't speak. My brain was frantically connecting dots that should have been obvious years ago. Sarah, who'd ghosted me after 3 months of what I thought was the most genuine connection of my life. Madison, who'd suddenly started acting like I was fragile, constantly asking if I was feeling okay before she inevitably pulled away. Ryan, who'd stopped returning my calls after my mom had insisted on meeting him for coffee. Jake, what is it? Emma leaned closer, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same one that used to drive me crazy when she'd stay over at my place. This message, I managed to croak out. From my mom. None of it is true. Emma's face went white. What do you mean? I've never had mental health episodes. I don't take medication. I've never talked to myself in my apartment. Hell, I barely talk to myself in my car. My voice was getting louder, more frantic. Emma, she made all of this up. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Emma's eyes darted between me and her phone screen, and I could practically see the gears turning in her head. But she seemed so concerned, Emma whispered. So worried about you. She said she was your emergency contact and that you'd had problems since college. What else did she tell you? Emma's thumb scrolled up, revealing more messages. Each one was a masterpiece of manipulation, detailed stories about my supposed instability, claims that I'd been acting strange around family, fabricated incidents that painted me as someone on the verge of a breakdown. She said you'd been fired from jobs for erratic behavior, Emma read aloud, her voice barely audible. That you'd scared your previous girlfriends. I felt like I was going to vomit. 28 years old, and I was just now realizing why every relationship I'd ever cared about had imploded after 2 to 3 months. Every single one, like clockwork. Emma, I said, grabbing her hand. I need you to think. Really think. In the 3 months we were together, did I ever, even once, act the way she described? Her eyes filled with tears. No, she whispered. Never. That's when I knew. My mother hadn't just interfered in my love life, she'd systematically destroyed it. Emma and I sat in her car for another hour, going through every message my mother had sent. Each screenshot was more devastating than the last. My mom had crafted an entire alternate reality where I was unstable, unreliable, and potentially dangerous. She told Emma about incidents with my college roommates that never happened, claimed I'd been hospitalized for episodes that were complete fiction, and even said I'd threatened her when she'd tried to get me help. Jake, I'm so sorry, Emma kept saying, tears streaming down her face. I should have talked to you directly. I should have. No, I cut her off. Don't apologize. She's had 30 years to perfect this manipulation. You're not the first person to believe her, and you won't be the last. But as I drove home, my shock began crystallizing into something else entirely, rage. Pure, white-hot fury that started in my chest and spread through my entire body like poison. I pulled into my apartment complex and sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. How many relationships had she destroyed? How many people had she convinced that I was some kind of ticking time bomb? My phone buzzed. A text from Mom, haven't heard from you in a few days, sweetheart. Just checking in. Love you. The casual normalcy of it made me want to scream. While I'd been beating myself up for years, wondering what was wrong with me, wondering why I couldn't maintain a relationship longer than a few months, she'd been playing puppet master behind the scenes. I scrolled through my contacts, looking at all the names of people who'd inexplicably grown cold, who'd started treating me like I was made of glass before eventually walking away. Sarah. Madison. Ryan. David. Jessica. The list went on and on. My hands were shaking as I called Sarah. We'd dated 2 years ago, and her sudden personality change had confused me more than any of the others. She'd gone from planning weekend trips together to barely making eye contact in the span of a week. Jake. Sarah sounded surprised. Wow, hi. How are you? Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I know it's going to sound weird, but did my mother ever contact you when we were dating? The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Oh God, Sarah breathed. Jake, she said she was worried about you. That you were going through something and might not tell me yourself. What exactly did she tell you? She said you'd been having panic attacks and that you'd gotten aggressive with her when she tried to help. She showed me pictures of bruises on her arms and said you didn't remember doing it because of your condition. My vision went red. Sarah, I have never laid a hand on my mother. I've never had panic attacks. She faked those bruises. But why would she? Sarah's voice trailed off, and I could hear the horrible realization dawning on her. Oh my God, Jake. Oh my God, what did I do? After I hung up, I sat in my car staring at my apartment building. The worst part wasn't even the relationships she destroyed, it was the decade I'd spent believing there was something fundamentally wrong with me. All those nights wondering why I couldn't connect with people, why everyone eventually saw something in me that made them run. I pulled up my mom's contact and stared at her smiling profile picture. For the first time in my adult life, I saw her clearly, not as my loving, overprotective mother, but as the architect of my romantic failures. The woman who'd rather see me alone forever than risk losing control over my life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my laptop making a list, every person I'd dated since college, every relationship that had mysteriously imploded right around the 3-month mark. By dawn, I had 17 names. 17 people whose lives my mother had infiltrated with her poison. I started making calls at 8 a.m., working my way down the list chronologically. Each conversation was like reliving a nightmare I'd never known I was having. David confirmed she told him I was experimenting with dangerous drugs. Jessica said mom had shown her fake medical records indicating I was bipolar and refusing treatment. Marcus revealed that she claimed I'd been stalking my ex-girlfriends. With every call, the scope of her deception became clearer. This wasn't just meddling, this was a systematic campaign of character assassination spanning over a decade. The worst part? She'd gotten better at it over time. Her early lies to my college girlfriend had been simple, just claims that I was going through a rough patch. But by the time she got to Emma, she developed an entire mythology around my supposed mental illness, complete with fabricated medical history and staged evidence. I was on my lunch break, sitting in my car outside the office, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Jake. This is Tom Morrison. It took me a second to place the name. Tom was Emma's older brother. I'd met him once at a barbecue. Emma told me what happened, he said without preamble. About your mother's messages. Jake, I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped. What? She didn't just message Emma. She contacted me too. And Emma's best friend, Kayla. And our parents. The world tilted sideways. What did she tell them? She said you'd been showing signs of becoming obsessive about Emma. That you'd driven by Emma's house multiple times when she wasn't answering your calls. She even sent my dad a photo of your car parked outside our neighborhood, claiming you'd been surveilling Emma's family. I gripped the phone so hard I thought it might crack. Tom, I was never. I know. Emma and I figured that out yesterday. But Jake, your mom didn't just sabotage your relationship with Emma. She tried to make Emma's entire family believe you were dangerous. Our dad was ready to call the police. After Tom hung up, I sat in my car hyperventilating. She hadn't just destroyed my relationships, she'd actively tried to destroy my reputation, potentially my career, maybe even my freedom. If Emma's father had filed a restraining order based on my mother's lies, it could have followed me for years. I pulled up my mother's contact again, my finger hovering over the call button. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to scream until my throat was raw. But a bigger part of me, the part that had learned to think strategically from years of debugging complex software problems, knew I needed more information first. That afternoon, I created a new email account and sent carefully worded messages to everyone on my list, asking if they'd be willing to share any communications they'd received from my family during our relationship. I didn't mention my mother specifically, I didn't want to influence their responses. The replies started coming within hours. Screenshots. Forwarded emails. Saved voicemails. A decade's worth of evidence showing exactly how my mother had systematically demolished every chance I'd had at love. But as I organized the evidence into folders on my laptop, one thing became crystal clear, she'd been escalating. Her lies had grown more elaborate, more damaging, more dangerous over time. Which meant Emma probably wasn't her masterpiece. Emma was her practice run. My phone buzzed with another text from Mom. Jake, you're worrying me. Call your mother back. I love you. For the first time in my life, those words made my skin crawl. I was staring at my mother's latest text when my phone rang. Unknown number again. Is this Jake Morrison? The voice was unfamiliar, professional. Yes, who's this? My name is Detective Linda Chen with the Portland Police Department. I'm calling about a wellness check request we received concerning you. Are you currently safe and in no danger of harming yourself or others? My blood turned to ice. I'm sorry, what? We received a call from someone claiming to be your mother. She said you'd been making concerning statements about hurting yourself and that she was worried you might be planning something dangerous. She provided this number and an address. The room started spinning. Detective, I'm fine. I'm at work, I'm completely stable, and I have no idea why anyone would. I stopped mid-sentence as the horrifying realization hit me. When exactly did you receive this call? About an hour ago. The caller seemed very distressed, said you'd stopped taking medication and had been acting erratically. An hour ago. Right around the time I'd been making calls to my ex-girlfriends, gathering evidence of her lies. Somehow, she'd found out. Detective Chen, I need you to understand something. I'm not on any medication, I've never threatened to hurt myself or anyone else, and whoever called you was lying. Sir, I understand this might be embarrassing, but... Can you tell me exactly what the caller said? There was a pause. She claimed you'd been sending threatening messages to family members and ex-girlfriends. She said she was afraid to come to your apartment herself because you'd become aggressive with her in the past. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing. My mother had just escalated from sabotaging my love life to potentially having me involuntarily committed or arrested. Detective, I can prove to you that I'm stable. I'm a software engineer, I'm at my office right now, my coworkers can vouch for me. But I need you to know that the person who called you has been systematically lying about me for years. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Morrison. I have evidence. Screenshots, messages, testimonies from multiple people. Detective Chen, my mother has been impersonating a concerned parent to destroy my relationships, and now she's apparently willing to involve law enforcement to maintain control. Another pause. Mr. Morrison, I'm going to need you to come down to the station. Not under arrest, she added quickly, but this situation requires clarification. After I hung up, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I sent a quick message to my boss explaining I had a family emergency and needed to leave early, then grabbed my laptop bag. If I was going to the police station, I was bringing evidence. The drive downtown gave me time to think, and what I realized made me feel sick. My mother somehow knew I'd been making calls. Which meant she was either monitoring my phone, my email, or... I pulled into the police station parking lot and immediately called Emma. Jake. What's wrong? You sound... Emma, did you tell anyone about what we discovered yesterday? Anyone at all? Just my brother Tom, and my roommate Kayla. Why? What about your parents? Any other family members? No, wait. Her voice got quiet. Jake, Tom said he might mention it to our parents. He was really angry about what your mom did to our family. He wanted to warn them in case she tried to contact them again. My heart sank. Emma, who are your parents friends with? Do they know anyone in my family? Oh God. The horror in her voice told me she'd figured it out. My mom and your Aunt Carol have been in the same book club for like 15 years. Jake, if Tom told my parents and my mom mentioned it to Carol, then my mom knows I found out. I leaned back against my car seat, staring up at the cloudy Portland sky. Emma, she just called the police on me. She told them I was suicidal and threatening people. What? Jake, no, that's insane. Even for her, that's... I'm sitting outside the police station right now. The silence stretched between us before Emma spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. She's not going to stop, is she? Even now that you know the truth, she's going to keep escalating until she destroys your entire life. As I walked toward the police station entrance, laptop bag slung over my shoulder and a decade's worth of evidence on my hard drive, I realized Emma was right. Confronting my mother wasn't going to fix this. She'd rather see me arrested, institutionalized, or completely isolated than lose control over my life. Which meant I needed to stop playing defense and start playing offense. The police station meeting went better than I'd expected, but worse than I'd hoped. Detective Chen was thorough, professional, and clearly unimpressed with what she called family manipulation tactics. After reviewing some of my evidence and confirming my employment and mental stability, she agreed that the wellness check had been unnecessary. However, she said, closing her notepad, this is now documented. If your mother calls again with false reports, we'll need to have a more serious conversation about filing charges for making false statements to police. I walked out of the station feeling like I'd won a battle but was definitely losing the war. My phone had been buzzing constantly during the 2-hour interview, but I'd kept it on silent. Now I finally looked at the screen and felt my stomach drop. 12 missed calls from my Aunt Carol. 6 from my cousin Mike. 4 from my Uncle Dave. And 3 voicemails from my mother, each progressively more frantic. The first voicemail was vintage mom, Jake, honey, I'm so worried about you. Carol told me you've been telling people terrible stories about me. I think you might be having some kind of breakdown. Please call me so we can talk through this together. The second one had an edge to it. Jake, I don't know what's gotten into you, but spreading lies about your mother is not acceptable. I've done nothing but love and protect you your entire life. Call me back immediately. The third was pure venom wrapped in motherly concern. I've talked to Dr. Patterson about your recent behavior, and he thinks you might need to be evaluated. I'm coming over to your apartment tonight so we can discuss getting you some help. Dr. Patterson. My family's old physician who retired 3 years ago and probably hadn't seen me since I was 22. She was already building her next lie, creating a paper trail to support whatever narrative she planned to construct. I sat in my car and called my Uncle Dave first. He was my mom's younger brother, and we'd always gotten along well. Jake, what the hell is going on? He sounded stressed. Carol says you're accusing your mother of some pretty serious stuff. Uncle Dave, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Has my mom ever talked to you about my mental health? A pause. Well, she's mentioned being worried about you from time to time. Said you've been struggling with anxiety, having trouble maintaining relationships. When did these conversations start? Another pause, longer this time. I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago. Right around when you graduated college. 8 or 9 years. Right when I'd started dating seriously. Uncle Dave, has she ever asked you to help keep an eye on me? Maybe suggested that my girlfriends might need to be warned about something. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Oh Christ, Jake. You're telling me she's been lying. I'm telling you I've never had anxiety disorder, I've never been treated for mental health issues, and every relationship I've had for the past decade has ended because she convinced them I was dangerous. I spent the next 20 minutes walking my uncle through some of the evidence. By the end of the call, his voice had changed completely. Jake, I am so sorry. I had no idea. She seemed so genuinely concerned, and you know how your mother can be when she thinks someone she loves is in trouble. After hanging up, I realized I had a choice to make. I could keep making individual calls, trying to convince family members one by one that my mother had been systematically lying for years. Or I could find a way to present the truth to everyone at once, in a way that would make denial impossible. My family had always been big on gatherings. Every major holiday, every birthday, every excuse to get together. And I suddenly remembered that my grandmother's 80th birthday party was scheduled for next weekend. Everyone would be there. All the aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone who'd been fed my mother's lies for years. Everyone who deserved to know the truth. I pulled out my laptop and started planning the most important presentation of my life. I spent the entire weekend holed up in my apartment, building what I mentally dubbed the case against Mom. 3 monitors, spreadsheets, timeline documents, and a presentation that would make my corporate PowerPoints look like crayon drawings. But Monday morning brought a complication I hadn't anticipated. My phone rang at 7 a.m. My boss, Derek. Jake, we need to talk. Can you come in early? 20 minutes later, I was sitting in Derek's office while he awkwardly shuffled papers on his desk. We'd worked together for 3 years. He'd never once called me before 9 a.m. Jake, I received a very concerning phone call over the weekend, he began, not meeting my eyes. From someone claiming to be your mother. My stomach dropped. What did she tell you? She said you've been experiencing some mental health issues and that it might be affecting your work performance. She seemed to think your coworkers might be in danger. The room felt like it was spinning. Derek, did she mention anything specific about my behavior here? He pulled out a notepad. She said you've been staying late obsessively, that you've been paranoid about other people accessing your computer, and that you've been sending inappropriate messages to female colleagues. Every word was a calculated lie designed to destroy my career. Derek, have you noticed any of those behaviors? In 3 years of working together? He looked uncomfortable. Well, no. But she seemed very knowledgeable about your medical history. She mentioned specific incidents and treatment facilities. What facilities? Riverdale Mental Health Center. She said you were treated there last year for paranoid episodes. I pulled out my phone and opened my calendar, scrolling back 12 months. Derek, look at this. Here's every day I worked last year. I hadn't taken a sick day in 18 months, let alone disappeared for mental health treatment. His expression shifted as he studied my phone screen. Jake, why would your mother lie about something like this? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Mike. Dude, your mom called my workplace too. Said you've been making threats against family members. What's going on? Then another text from Emma. Jake, call me immediately. Your mom contacted my HR department. The room started spinning. She wasn't just escalating, she was launching a full-scale nuclear strike against my entire life. Derek, I need to show you something, I said, opening my laptop. But first, I need you to understand that everything my mother told you was a lie. I can prove it. For the next hour, I walked Derek through the evidence. The screenshots from Emma, the testimonies from my exes, the timeline of destroyed relationships. His expression shifted from skepticism to concern to outright horror. Jesus Christ, Jake. This is sociopathic behavior. And now she's targeting my career because I found out the truth. Derek leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. What do you need from me? Documentation. If she calls again, I need you to document exactly what she says. And Derek? She's probably going to escalate. She might try to have me arrested for something, or claim I've threatened her. I need you to know that whatever she says, it's a lie. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang. Mom's contact photo filled the screen, her smiling face now looking more menacing than loving. I looked at Derek. Should I answer it? He nodded, then gestured for me to put it on speaker. Jake, sweetheart, I'm so glad you answered. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. I've been worried sick about you. Have you, Mom? Is that why you called my boss and told him I was dangerous? A pause. Honey, I'm just trying to get you the help you need. You're clearly having some kind of episode, making up these terrible stories about me. I think the stress of your job might be too much for you right now. Derek's eyes widened as he listened to her performance. Mom, I have evidence of everything you've done. Screenshots, testimonies, documentation going back years. Her voice hardened. Jake, you're scaring me. This paranoid thinking, these delusions. I think we need to have you evaluated by a professional. Which professional? Dr. Patterson, who retired 3 years ago. Or maybe someone at Riverdale Mental Health Center, where you told my boss I was treated last year. Silence. For the first time in my adult life, I'd caught my mother in a lie she couldn't explain away. When she spoke again, the mask had slipped completely. You ungrateful little brat. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. Derek's jaw dropped. I ended the call. Well, I said, now you know who I'm really dealing with. The next morning brought a new nightmare I hadn't even considered possible. I was pulling into my parking spot at work when my phone rang. My landlord, Mrs. Chen. Jake, I need to speak with you immediately. I've received some very disturbing reports about your behavior. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What kind of reports? Your mother called me yesterday. She said you've been having episodes, that you might be dangerous to other tenants. She also said you've been behind on rent and that she's been covering for you. I closed my eyes, feeling that familiar sensation of the ground disappearing beneath my feet. Mrs. Chen, I've never been late on rent in 2 years. You can check your records. She also mentioned that you've been bringing strange people to your apartment at odd hours, and that other tenants have complained about noise and arguing. What other tenants? Have you actually received any complaints? A pause. Well, no. But she seemed very concerned, and she knew so many details about your lease agreement. Of course she did. She'd helped me find the apartment when I'd first moved to Portland, had been there when I'd signed the lease. She'd stored away every piece of information for future ammunition. After convincing Mrs. Chen to check her actual records, which showed I'd been a model tenant, I sat in my car trying to process the scope of what was happening. In less than a week since discovering the truth, my mother had contacted my boss, my ex-girlfriend's HR department, my family members, the police, and now my landlord. She was systematically trying to destroy every pillar of my adult life. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. We need to talk. In person. Something's happened. An hour later, I was sitting across from Emma in the same coffee shop where this nightmare had started. But this time, she looked terrified. Jake, she came to my work yesterday. My blood went cold. She what? She showed up at my office building. Told the security guard she was your mother and that she needed to warn me about your deteriorating condition. They let her up because she seemed so genuinely worried. What did she tell you? Emma's hands were shaking as she pulled out her phone. She recorded part of the conversation. Said she wanted me to hear how confused and paranoid you'd become. She hit play, and my mother's voice filled the space between us, dripping with fake concern. Emma, I know Jake has convinced you that I'm some kind of monster, but I need you to understand, he's very sick right now. He's created this elaborate fantasy where I'm sabotaging his relationships because he can't accept that his behavior drives people away. My jaw clenched. Even caught red-handed, she was still trying to manipulate the narrative. The recording continued. I've been trying to get him professional help for months, but he becomes violent when anyone suggests therapy. Just last week, he threw a lamp at me during one of his episodes. That's completely fabricated, I said through gritted teeth. Emma nodded. I know. But Jake, she was so convincing. If I hadn't seen those screenshots, if I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. She had medical documents, hospital bracelets, even photos of bruises on her arms. She's staging evidence now. It gets worse, Emma continued. She told my supervisor that you'd been stalking me, that you'd threatened to hurt yourself if I didn't take you back. She even provided them with a fake suicide note that she claimed you'd sent me. The coffee cup slipped from my hands, clattering against the saucer. Emma, I know. But my HR department is taking it seriously. They've banned you from the building and suggested I file a restraining order. I stared at her, feeling like I was drowning. She's not just trying to destroy my current life. She's making sure I can never build a new one. That's when I realized the true scope of her plan. This wasn't just about maintaining control, this was about ensuring I'd have no choice but to depend on her completely. No career, no relationships, no reputation, no independence. She was trying to make me disappear back into her suffocating embrace by eliminating every other option. Emma, I said quietly, I need to ask you something, and I know it sounds crazy. But do you trust me enough to help me fight back? She looked into my eyes for a long moment. What do you need? I need you to come to my grandmother's birthday party this weekend. I need witnesses when I present the evidence to my family. People she can't dismiss or discredit. Emma was quiet for a moment. Jake, if I do this, there's no going back. She'll know I'm on your side. There's no going back anyway. She's already trying to destroy both our lives. She nodded slowly. Then let's end this. I spent the rest of the week feeling like I was preparing for war. Every phone call could be another attack, every email might bring news of another life she tried to sabotage. But Thursday brought something I hadn't expected, reinforcements. My phone rang during lunch. Unknown local number. Is this Jake Morrison? The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. Yes, who's this? My name is Amanda Phillips. This is going to sound strange, but I think your mother destroyed my relationship too. I nearly dropped my sandwich. I'm sorry, what? I dated your brother Chris about 5 years ago. We were together for almost 4 months before everything fell apart. Your mother told me he was using substances and that he'd been violent with previous girlfriends. My heart started pounding. I don't have a brother named Chris. Silence on the other end. What? Amanda, I'm an only child. I've never had a brother. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Oh my god. Oh my god, but she showed me pictures. Family photos with you and Chris together. She probably photoshopped them. Amanda, who exactly did you date? Chris Morrison. He said his mother was Patricia Morrison and that his younger brother Jake lived in Portland. Her voice trailed off. Jake, I think your mother created an entire fake son to practice her manipulation techniques on. I sat in my car, stunned. Amanda, I need to ask you something important. Do you still have those messages? The ones she sent you about Chris? Every single one. I kept them because they were so detailed, so concerning. I always wondered why Chris never seemed to match what she described. Where did you meet this Chris? Online dating. We talked for weeks before meeting in person. He was sweet, funny, seemed really genuine. Then his mother started contacting me out of nowhere, and... She paused. Jake, what if Chris was real? What if she did this to him too, and he just disappeared? A chill ran down my spine. Amanda, can you send me everything you have? And do you remember Chris's profile details? What he said he did for work? He was a graphic designer. Freelance. Said he traveled a lot for work, which explained why we could never go to his place. After Amanda hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Either my mother had created an elaborate catfishing scheme to practice her manipulation tactics, or there was another victim out there, someone who'd been so thoroughly destroyed that he'd vanished completely. I spent my lunch break creating a new post on 3 different Reddit forums, r/Portland, r/relationship_advice, and r/RBI. I described the situation carefully, asking if anyone had encountered Patricia Morrison or had dated someone named Chris Morrison who'd suddenly disappeared after his mother's interference. The responses started coming within hours. Holy shit, yes. Chris Morrison ghosted me 3 years ago after his crazy mother started sending me weird messages. I dated a Chris Morrison in 2019. His mom told me he was bipolar and dangerous. I always wondered what happened to him. Patricia Morrison contacted my workplace about her son, Chris, in 2020. Said he was having a mental breakdown and might become violent. I never met the guy, but she had HR convinced he was a threat. By Thursday evening, I had messages from 11 different women who'd encountered Chris Morrison and his concerned mother. The timeline stretched back 7 years. 7 years of my mother practicing and refining her techniques on fake relationships before escalating to destroying my real ones. But the message that made my blood run cold came at 9 p.m. Jake, this is going to sound insane, but I think I actually met the real Chris Morrison. We matched on a dating app 2 years ago but never met in person. He told me his mother had been impersonating him online, destroying relationships with women he'd never even met. He said he was planning to disappear completely because he couldn't handle what she'd done to his reputation. I haven't heard from him since. I screenshot every message, added them to my growing mountain of evidence. Tomorrow was my grandmother's birthday party. Tomorrow, I would present everything to my family and let them decide whether they believed their beloved Patricia was capable of this level of systematic destruction. But tonight, I couldn't shake the terrifying possibility that I wasn't my mother's only victim. I was just the only one who'd survived long enough to fight back. My phone buzzed with one final message before I went to bed. My mother, looking forward to seeing you at Grandma's party tomorrow, sweetheart. It'll be so nice to have the whole family together. We have so much to discuss. Red heart. The heart emoji felt like a threat. The morning of my grandmother's birthday party, I woke up to find my car tires slashed. All 4 of them, cut clean through in my apartment complex's parking lot. I stood there in my dress shirt and slacks, laptop bag full of evidence slung over my shoulder, staring at the deliberate destruction. My hands were shaking as I called a rideshare, knowing exactly who was responsible. She was escalating again. Making sure I understood the stakes. The drive to my grandmother's house gave me 45 minutes to review my presentation one last time, but I could barely focus. Every few minutes, my phone buzzed with new messages from family members. Aunt Carol, Jake, honey, your mother is so worried about you. Maybe we should talk privately before the party. Cousin Mike, dude, Mom says you've been having some kind of breakdown. You okay? Uncle Dave, Jake, I know we talked earlier this week, but your mom showed me some pretty concerning evidence yesterday. We need to discuss this. Evidence. She'd spent the week preparing her defense, probably creating more fake documentation, more staged photos, more elaborate lies to counter whatever I might present. Emma had agreed to meet me at the party, but as my rideshare pulled up to my grandmother's familiar suburban house, I saw her car wasn't there yet. Neither were most of the family cars, actually. The party wasn't supposed to start for another hour, but my mother's Honda was already in the driveway. She was here early, laying groundwork. I paid the driver and walked up the front steps, my laptop bag feeling heavier with each step. Through the window, I could see my mother sitting at the kitchen table with my grandmother, their heads bent close together in conversation. The front door was unlocked, it always was during family gatherings. I stepped inside and heard my mother's voice carrying from the kitchen. Just breaks my heart, Mom. He's been so paranoid lately, convinced that everyone is against him. Yesterday he accused me of sabotaging his relationships, can you believe that? After everything I've done to help him find someone nice. My grandmother's voice, friendlier than I remembered. Oh, Patricia, that doesn't sound like our Jake at all. He's always been such a sweet boy. That's what makes it so heartbreaking. The Jake we knew is still in there somewhere, but this illness, it's changing him into someone I don't recognize. He even called the police and told them I was harassing him. I stood frozen in the entryway, listening to her rewrite history in real time. Should we be worried about today? My grandmother asked. With the whole family here? I hope not, but I've prepared everyone just in case. If he starts making wild accusations or showing people fake evidence he's created, we'll know it's time to get him professional help. Fake evidence. She'd already poisoned the well, priming everyone to dismiss anything I showed them as delusions. I cleared my throat and stepped into the kitchen doorway. Hi, Grandma. Happy birthday. My grandmother's face lit up, but I caught the flicker of concern in her eyes. Jake. Oh, sweetheart, come give your old grandma a hug. I crossed the kitchen and embraced her, avoiding my mother's gaze entirely. Over my grandmother's shoulder, I could see Mom watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, cold calculation mixed with something that might have been fear. You're here early, she said, her voice carefully neutral. So are you. I straightened up, still not looking at her directly. Getting your story straight before everyone arrives. Jake. My grandmother's voice carried a warning tone. That's no way to speak to your mother. You're right, Grandma. I should probably wait until everyone's here before I explain what's really been going on. The silence stretched between the three of us like a wire about to snap. Finally, my mother stood up from the table. I think I'll go help set up the decorations in the living room, she said sweetly. Jake, maybe you could help your grandmother with the food preparation. I know how much you enjoy spending time together. As she left the kitchen, she paused next to me just long enough to whisper, whatever you think you're going to accomplish today, it won't work. These people have known me for 30 years. They've known you for your whole life. Guess which one of us they trust more. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my grandmother and the crushing weight of what I was about to do. The next hour was psychological warfare disguised as party preparation. Family members trickled in while I helped my grandmother arrange food platters, and I watched my mother work the room like a politician before a crucial vote. She hugged everyone a little longer than usual, spoke in hushed, concerned tones, and kept glancing in my direction with perfectly performed worry. I caught fragments of her conversations as I moved between the kitchen and dining room. Just hoping today goes smoothly. Been under so much stress lately. If he seems agitated, just try to stay calm. By the time Emma arrived, my mother had already spoken privately with every single family member except my grandmother. I watched through the front window as Emma parked across the street, clearly nervous about entering what she knew would be hostile territory. When she rang the doorbell, it was my mother who answered. You must be Emma, I heard her say, voice dripping with false warmth. Jake's told me so much about you. Well, back when he was more, himself. I appeared in the hallway before Emma could respond. Emma, thanks for coming. My mother stepped aside but didn't retreat. Emma, dear, I hope Jake hasn't filled your head with too many strange stories. He's been going through a very difficult time lately. Emma looked between us, clearly understanding she was walking into a minefield. I'm just here to support Jake. Of course you are. That's very sweet. My mother's smile never wavered. Just remember that sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we care about is help them face reality, even when they're not ready to see it themselves. The coded threat hung in the air as my mother glided back toward the living room, leaving Emma and me standing in the hallway. Jesus, Emma whispered. She's even scarier in person. You haven't seen anything yet, I murmured back. She's had an hour to prepare everyone. This is going to be harder than I thought. We joined the family gathering in the living room, where about 15 people were chatting and laughing around my grandmother's birthday cake. The moment I entered, conversations didn't stop exactly, but they shifted. Voices became slightly more careful, glances more frequent in my direction. My Uncle Dave approached with what I recognized as forced casualness. Jake, good to see you. How's work been going? Fine, I said, then realized he was probably fishing based on whatever my mother had told him about my supposed workplace issues. Actually, really well. Just got a commendation from my boss last week. Dave's eyebrows rose slightly, and I caught him glancing toward my mother across the room. That's great to hear. My Aunt Carol joined us, her smile overly bright. Jake, honey, your mom mentioned you've been working too hard lately. Maybe taking on too much stress. I felt Emma tense beside me. They were tag-teaming me, trying to establish the narrative of someone on the edge of a breakdown. Actually, I've been working normal hours. But I have been busy with a research project about online manipulation and family dynamics. Very eye-opening stuff. The words landed exactly as I'd intended. Carol's smile faltered, and I saw my mother's head turn sharply from across the room. Research project, my cousin Mike had wandered over, drawn by some instinct that drama was brewing. Family psychology, I said loudly enough for the room to hear. Specifically about how family members sometimes sabotage each other's relationships and careers. Amazing what people will do when they're afraid of losing control. The room went quiet. Every conversation stopped. All eyes turned toward me, then toward my mother, then back to me. My grandmother cleared her throat from her chair by the window. Well, this seems like an interesting topic for academic discussion. Jake, why don't you tell us what you've learned? Perfect. My grandmother had just given me the opening I needed, and she didn't even know it. I walked to my laptop bag and pulled out my computer. Actually, Grandma, I'd love to share my research with everyone. I think you'll find it very educational. My mother's mask finally slipped completely. Jake, please don't do this. Not here. Not today. But I was already connecting my laptop to the TV, the same one where we'd watched countless family movies over the years. Why not today, Mom? These people love us both. I'm sure they'd want to know the truth. The first slide appeared on the TV screen, the systematic destruction of Jake Morrison's relationships, a case study in psychological manipulation. A collective intake of breath filled the room. My mother stepped forward, her voice taking on that familiar tone of wounded authority. Jake, sweetheart, please don't embarrass yourself like this. Everyone here loves you, but... Then they'll want to see the evidence, I interrupted, advancing to the next slide. A timeline appeared, spanning 10 years. This is every serious relationship I've had since college. Notice anything interesting about the duration? My Uncle Dave squinted at the screen. They all ended around 3 months. Exactly. Every single one. What are the odds of that happening naturally? I clicked again. Here's what I thought was happening. I was somehow fundamentally flawed, driving people away with behavior I couldn't even identify. I saw several family members nodding sympathetically. My mother had trained them well to see me as the problem. But last week, I discovered the real pattern. The next slide showed Emma's screenshot, my mother's message about my supposed mental health crisis. Emma, would you mind reading this aloud? Emma's voice was steady, but I could see her hands trembling. I'm so worried about Jake. He's been struggling with his mental health again, and I think he's having another episode. Last week I found him talking to himself in his apartment. My cousin Sarah gasped. Wait, Aunt Patricia, you never said anything about Jake talking to himself. Because it never happened, I said firmly. Emma, when we were dating, did you ever see me exhibit any of the behaviors described in that message? Never. Not once. My mother's voice cracked slightly. Emma, honey, Jake has convinced you to lie for him. Can't you see how sick that is? But I was already clicking to the next slide. Sarah Martinez, Madison Chen, Ryan Thompson, a parade of names and screenshots, each telling the same story. Here's what she told Sarah about me being fired for erratic behavior. Sarah, I've never been fired from any job. Click. Here's what she told Madison about me threatening previous girlfriends. Madison, have you ever known me to threaten anyone? My Aunt Madison shook her head slowly, her face pale. And here's my personal favorite, I said, advancing to a particularly damning screenshot. She told Jessica that I was stalking my ex-girlfriends and provided this photo as evidence of me surveilling someone's house. The image showed my car parked outside a residential neighborhood. Several family members leaned forward to get a better look. Anyone recognize that location? I waited a beat. That's Aunt Carol's street. The photo was taken last Christmas when I came to your holiday party, Mom. You took this picture yourself and saved it for 8 months to use as fake evidence. The room was dead silent. I could hear my grandmother's antique clock ticking from the mantel. Aunt Carol's voice was barely a whisper. Patricia, is that true? My mother's composure was cracking. He's manipulating all of you. He's created these fake screenshots, he's coached Emma on what to say. Then explain this. I clicked to the next slide, showing the timeline of my mother's escalating lies. Notice how the stories became more elaborate over time. Early relationships got simple warnings about me being troubled. But by the time she got to Emma, she developed detailed medical histories, staged evidence, even fake hospital records. My Uncle Dave stood up abruptly. Patricia, last month you told me Jake had been hospitalized for paranoid episodes. You said I should avoid being alone with him. Because I was trying to protect you. From what? Dave's voice was getting louder. From Jake helping me move furniture. From Jake fixing my computer. What exactly was I in danger from? The walls were closing in on her, and I could see the exact moment she decided to deploy her nuclear option. He's been threatening me, she said, suddenly pulling up her sleeves to reveal fresh bruises on her forearms. Look what he did to me yesterday when I tried to get him help. The room erupted. Jake, oh my God. My grandmother's horrified gasp cut through everything else. Patricia, how could you not tell us? Aunt Carol rushed toward my mother, examining the purple bruises covering her forearms. I felt Emma step closer to me, but the rest of my family was pulling away like I'd suddenly become radioactive. The evidence on the TV screen might as well have disappeared. All anyone could see now were those perfectly placed bruises. I didn't want to worry anyone, my mother said, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. I kept hoping I could get through to him, help him see reason before. She gestured helplessly at her arms. My Uncle Dave's expression had completely changed. Jake, what the hell is wrong with you? Putting your hands on your mother. I've never touched her. The words exploded out of me. I haven't even seen her in person since last month. That's not true, my mother said quietly. He came to my house yesterday morning, demanding that I stop interfering in his life. When I wouldn't admit to his delusions, he grabbed me and... I was at work yesterday morning. I pulled out my phone, frantically scrolling to my calendar. Derek, my boss, can verify. Jake. My grandmother's voice stopped me cold. She was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen before, fear mixed with disappointment. Sweetheart, your mother wouldn't hurt herself just to make you look bad. But she would. I knew she would, because I was finally seeing the full scope of what she was capable of. The slashed tires this morning hadn't been vandalism, they'd been a warning shot. She'd physically harmed herself to create evidence, probably right before coming to the party. Grandma, please, just look at the timeline. I gestured desperately toward the TV screen. Look at the pattern of lies spanning 10 years. Enough. My Uncle Dave's voice cut through my pleading. Jake, I think you need to leave. The words hit me like a physical blow. Dave, you said on the phone that you believed me. You said you were sorry for not seeing through her manipulation. That was before I saw what you did to her. His eyes were hard, disgusted. I don't care what story she might have told, there's no excuse for violence. I looked around the room, watching my family's expressions shift from confusion to horror to condemnation. Everything I prepared for, all the evidence I'd gathered, meant nothing in the face of those bruises. She did this to herself, I said, my voice cracking. She knew I was going to present evidence today, so she created new evidence to discredit me. My cousin Mike actually laughed bitterly. Listen to yourself, Jake. You're claiming Mom beat herself up to frame you. That's insane. No more insane than her impersonating a fake son named Chris Morrison for 7 years to practice destroying relationships, I shot back, clicking to my additional evidence about Chris. I have testimony from 11 different women who... Stop. My mother's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried absolute authority. Please, everyone, just stop. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Jake has created this elaborate conspiracy theory because he can't accept that his own behavior drives people away. She turned to face Emma, and I saw calculation flash across her features. Emma, honey, I know he's convinced you to be part of this, but look around this room. These people have known Jake his entire life, known me for decades. Do you really think we'd all be wrong about our own family member? Emma's voice was steady, but I could hear the strain. I think Jake is telling the truth about the messages you sent me. I have them saved on my phone. Sweetheart, people can fake screenshots these days. It's surprisingly easy. My mother's tone was gentle, understanding. I know Jake seems very convincing, but paranoid delusions often appear completely logical to the person experiencing them. I watched in horror as doubt flickered across Emma's face. Even she was starting to question what we both knew to be true. The police report, I said suddenly. From when she called in a false wellness check. Detective Chin documented everything. You mean when I called because I was genuinely worried about my son's mental state? My mother's voice hardened slightly. Yes, I called the police. Any concerned parent would have. My Aunt Carol nodded sympathetically. Of course you would, Patricia. That was the responsible thing to do. The presentation I'd spent days crafting, the evidence I'd meticulously gathered, the testimonies from multiple victims, none of it mattered. She'd outmaneuvered me with 5 minutes of preparation and a willingness to physically harm herself. Jake, my grandmother said softly, I think maybe you should go home and rest. We can talk more when you're feeling better. The dismissal was gentle but final. I looked around the room one last time, seeing my family, people who'd known me since birth, looking at me like I was a dangerous stranger. Only Emma met my eyes, and I could see the conflict there. She believed me, but she was starting to doubt her own judgment. My mother had won again. But as I packed up my laptop, I caught something in her expression, a flicker of triumph she couldn't quite hide. And I realized she'd made one crucial mistake. She was enjoying this too much. I was halfway to the door when Emma's voice cut through the uncomfortable silence. Wait. She was staring at my mother with a strange expression. Mrs. Morrison, can I ask you something? My mother's smile was patient, condescending. Of course, dear. Those bruises on your arms. When exactly did Jake supposedly give them to you? Yesterday morning, around 10 o'clock. Why? Emma pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. That's interesting, because Jake was in a video conference with my entire marketing team at 10:15 yesterday. I have the meeting recording right here. The room went quiet again, but this time the energy was different. My mother's eyes flicked toward the phone, then back to Emma's face. Well, it might have been closer to 9:30, she said quickly. When you're being attacked, you don't exactly check the time. The meeting started at 9:45, Emma continued, her voice getting stronger. Jake was presenting a client proposal. He'd been online for at least 15 minutes before that, doing tech checks. She looked around the room. Your son was on camera, speaking to 23 people, at the exact time you claimed he was at your house assaulting you. I felt something loosen in my chest. Emma, you recorded the meeting. Company policy. All client-related meetings get archived. She was already pulling up the file. Mrs. Morrison, would you like to see the timestamp? My mother's face had gone very pale. Those recordings can be manipulated. Jake works in technology, he could have. Mom. My cousin Sarah's voice was sharp. Stop talking. The shift in the room was immediate. Sarah had always been the family skeptic, the one who questioned everything. If she was turning, others would follow. Patricia, my Uncle Dave said slowly, if Jake was provably at work during a recorded meeting, then when did he actually give you those bruises? I might have gotten the time wrong. It's been a very stressful week. What about the day? Emma interrupted. Are you sure it was yesterday? My mother's hands were shaking now. Of course I'm sure. A mother doesn't forget when her own son. Because Jake's car has been in the shop since Tuesday, Emma continued relentlessly. Transmission problems. I've been giving him rides to work all week. That was a lie. Emma had only given me one ride, this morning after my tires were slashed, but she was building a trap and my mother was walking straight into it. He could have taken public transportation, my mother said weakly. To your house in Beaverton. That would take 3 hours round trip. But we can check the security cameras at his office building, see what time he badged in yesterday. My Aunt Carol was staring at my mother with growing horror. Patricia, how did you really get those bruises? The silence stretched until my grandmother's clock chimed the hour. My mother looked around the room, seeing the doubt spreading like wildfire across faces that had been sympathetic just minutes before. When she spoke again, her voice had changed completely, colder, more calculating. Fine. You want the truth. I gave myself these bruises because I knew he'd come here with his lies and manipulations. I knew you'd all believe his fake evidence unless you could see what he was really capable of. The admission hit the room like a physical blow. My Uncle Dave actually stepped backward. You hurt yourself. My grandmother's voice was barely a whisper. To frame your own son. To save him, my mother snapped. He's destroying his life with these paranoid fantasies. Someone had to make you all see reality before he completely lost touch with it. But even as she said it, I could see her realizing the magnitude of her mistake. She'd just admitted to staging evidence, which meant everything else I presented suddenly looked a lot more credible. Emma was already advancing to the next slide in my presentation. Maybe we should look at that timeline again, she said quietly. This time, people were really listening. The room stayed frozen for what felt like an eternity after my mother's admission. Then my cousin Sarah broke the silence. Aunt Patricia, show me your phone. What? My mother clutched her purse protectively against her chest. Your phone. If Jake's been sending you threatening messages like you claimed, they'll be in your text history. Sarah, I don't think, my mother began, but my Uncle Dave cut her off. Show us the phone, Patricia. If Jake's been harassing you, we need to see the evidence. I watched my mother's face cycle through emotions, panic, calculation, defiance. Finally, she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. I deleted them. They were too upsetting to keep. Deleted messages can be recovered, Emma said quietly. Jake could probably do it in about 5 minutes. No. The sharpness in my mother's voice surprised everyone. I mean, that won't be necessary. You're all missing the point. Jake needs help, and I was just trying to. Mom, stop. My cousin Mike's voice was flat. Just, stop talking. He turned to address the room. Can everyone see what's happening here? She admitted to faking evidence. She lied about when Jake supposedly attacked her. How do we know anything else she's told us is true? My Aunt Carol sank into a chair, looking stricken. Patricia, did you really contact Jake's girlfriends? Did you really tell them he was dangerous? I was protecting them. Jake doesn't know how to maintain healthy relationships, and these women deserve to know. That's not your decision to make. My Uncle Dave's voice boomed across the room. Jesus Christ, Patricia, do you hear yourself? But I could see my mother regrouping, shifting tactics. She'd survived exposure before, she could survive it again. You're all acting like I'm some kind of monster, she said, her voice taking on that familiar wounded tone. Everything I've done has been out of love. Jake has always been fragile, ever since he was little. I've spent 30 years protecting him from situations he couldn't handle. By destroying every relationship he tried to build. Emma's voice was getting stronger, angrier. By convincing his employers he was dangerous. By calling the police with false reports. My mother turned on Emma with sudden venom. And who are you exactly? Some girl he's known for 5 minutes who thinks she understands our family dynamics. You have no idea what Jake was like as a child, what I've had to deal with. I know what he's like now, Emma shot back. He's kind, stable, and successful. The only toxic element in his life is you. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I watched my mother's mask slip completely for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. Emma, dear, she said with false sweetness, you should know that Jake has been sending me screenshots of your private conversations. He's been sharing details about your relationship, laughing about things you told him in confidence. Did you know he calls you clingy Emma when he talks to me? The lie was so smooth, so perfectly crafted to drive a wedge between Emma and me, that for a second even I almost believed it. But Emma just smiled. Nice try, but Jake's never had my number in his phone as anything but my name. I checked when we first started comparing your messages. My mother's face flushed red. She was losing control of the narrative, grasping for weapons that weren't working. Fine, she spat. You want to make me the villain? Go ahead. But when Jake has his next breakdown, when he ends up alone because he can't maintain adult relationships without his mother's guidance, don't come crying to me. That's when my grandmother finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. Patricia, I think you need to leave my house. The words hit my mother like a physical slap. In 30 years, I had never heard my grandmother speak to anyone in that tone. Mom, you don't understand, my mother said, her voice cracking. I'm the victim here. Jake has been. I understand perfectly. My grandmother's voice was steel-wrapped in silk. You hurt yourself to frame your grandson. You've been lying to this family for years. And you've been systematically destroying Jake's chances at happiness. She stood up slowly, her 80-year-old frame radiating more dignity than my mother had ever possessed. I want you out of my house. Now. The silence was deafening. My mother looked around the room desperately, searching for a single sympathetic face. She found none. You're all going to regret this, she said, her voice taking on an ugly edge I'd never heard before. When Jake falls apart without my support, when he can't handle real life, don't expect me to pick up the pieces. Patricia. Uncle Dave stepped forward, and I could see years of suppressed frustration in his expression. Get out. Before I call the police myself. My mother grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but she stopped next to Emma, leaning in close enough that only Emma and I could hear her whisper, this isn't over. I will destroy you both. Then she was gone, the front door slamming behind her with finality. The room stayed quiet for a long moment before my grandmother sank back into her chair, looking every one of her 80 years. Jake, sweetheart, I am so sorry, she said, tears in her eyes. How long has this been going on? 10 years that I know of, I said, my voice hoarse. Maybe longer. One by one, my family members approached me. Apologies, hugs, promises to be more careful about believing family rumors without verification. Uncle Dave gripped my shoulder hard enough to bruise. I should have trusted my gut, he said. She always had an explanation for everything, but something never felt right. Aunt Carol was crying openly. All those times she told me you were struggling, I should have called you directly. I should have checked on you myself instead of just accepting her version. But it was my cousin Sarah who asked the question everyone was thinking, Jake, what are you going to do now? She's not going to just disappear. I looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. I'm going to keep documenting everything. Every contact attempt, every lie she tells, every person she tries to turn against me. And I'm going to build a life she can't touch. We'll help, Mike said firmly. All of us. She can't manipulate what she can't access. My grandmother called me over to her chair and took my hands in hers. Jake, I want you to know something. Your grandfather and I always worried about your mother's need to control everything around her. We saw how she managed your childhood, but we told ourselves she was just being protective. Her eyes were clear and determined. We should have intervened years ago. That's on us, not you. Grandma, you couldn't have known. Maybe not the extent of it, but we knew enough. She squeezed my hands. Promise me something. Promise me you won't let her steal another day of your happiness. You deserve love, real love, without conditions or manipulation. I looked around the room at my family, really looked at them for the first time in years without the filter of my mother's interpretations and interventions. These people loved me. They'd been manipulated too, but when presented with the truth, they'd chosen to believe it. Emma slipped her hand into mine. So what now? She asked quietly. I thought about the fake Chris Morrison, about the 11 women who'd been convinced he was dangerous, about Detective Chen's warnings about false police reports, about my slashed tires and my boss's confused phone call. I thought about 10 years of believing I was fundamentally unlovable. Now I live my life, I said. Without asking permission. For the first time in 30 years, my future felt like it belonged to me.